So, did you see the film? You don't need me to tell you that we're under pressure. It's an amazing film. And then to imagine that you just shared with me 18 years ago, ACCIÓN Empresas was formed in the same room. I don't know, who was there 18 years ago? Anyone? Okay, I see one hand. That's cool. 2 hands. 3 hands. Well done. It's amazing what you have built, and congratulations on it. And congratulations on the film. I hope you publish it widely, because it's a very convincing 40 seconds. Why we're in the race against time, why action is needed now, and what we must do. And I think every day when I wake up, you read the news, the paper, you watch the television, you see the next disaster happening, or social issue arising, or unexpected electoral results appear. And every morning I ask myself, what am I going to do about this? And if all of us ask ourselves that question every morning, what are we going to do about it? We're going to build a much better world than the one that we seemingly have today. This is us. I'm Peter Bakker. We're the World Bussines Council for Sustainable Development. So our middle name is Business. We are here because we believe that business has a key role to play in the transition that our society needs. And as you can see from the logos on the screen, we get to work with many of the leading companies in the world. We're very, very proud to work with ACCIÓN Empresas. WBCSD has 60 networks like ACCIÓN Empresas around the world. This is my second visit to Chile to be part of your discussions, and I must say I'm impressed at how you can mobilize not just business leaders, but also governmental leaders like we did last night. It's a great network that you have here, and any companies who's in the room who has not yet signed up to be part of this, please sign up to be part of ACCIÓN Empresas, because we need more voices in this debate. The network needs to broaden out. Tell your friends, your families, your colleagues in other companies to consider this, because it is a race of time, but it's also a race that no company can finish alone. We need to do this together. So in the WBCSD, the World Bussines Council, we work with 2 of the companies here in Chile. So CMPC have been a long-standing member, and Maciza as well. Both CEOs I got to meet yesterday, both remain completely committed to bring the Chilean voice to the global conversation that we at WBCSD can mobilize. For 2018, we have used this as the theme: lead, transform, succeed. And what I want to do is talk quickly to you about why did we choose this theme and how would it be applicable to your business here in Chile as well. The lead is relatively obvious. We believe that business has a key role to play, must lead, and I'll explain to you why we believe that and how we see that unfold in many parts of the world. The second thing is, we are now at society at a point that everything will transform. So anyone who sits in the room and thinks, yeah, sustainability is about incrementally doing a little bit better, you are wrong. Systems will radically transform, and they will transform in the next 5 to 10 years. So this is a great moment to come to this breakfast, to be part of the ACCIÓN Empresas movement, because massive change is on our doorstep, and I'll give you examples of that. And of course, we are in business. We are not philanthropists. I know all of you have good hearts, otherwise you wouldn't have come. But we are really talking, how can we use business? And how can we use business success to create a better society? And that is why succeed is the last of our words. So let me talk a bit about transformation. So 2 years ago, I was not in this room, but I was in other rooms talking about the great success of the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. And it's true. I mean, these are important multilateral agreements that the world has struck. The Paris Agreement probably got most famous because one country Or was it one guy decided to walk away from it? And that's what the press likes to talk about. But the more important thing is all other countries of the world have signed up, our part, are now implementing. So the reality is very simple. You may not always like it, depending on which model of business you work in, but the transition to a decarbonized world, to a world where we will not use fossil fuels, is now inevitable. It is happening. So sometimes it's good to only visit a country or anywhere once every 5 years. 5 years ago I was here. I don't think in the same hotel, but we met and we talked about what is Chile doing. And 5 years ago, 5% of Chilean energy was renewable energy. Today, 5 years later, it is 19% of your energy is from renewable sources. And many more billions of dollars are being invested to scale that up further. If I would have said 5 years ago that in the next 5 years you would quadruple the renewable energies, most people in the room would have said, yeah, hippie, you're dreaming, man. But it happened. So transformation is now going fast. It's not an easy path. You know, we live in uncertain times. There are, since the Paris Agreement, since the SDGs have been put in place, there are so many developments around the world that are strikingly unpredicted. You know, the rise of strong leaders, of protectionism, of unexpected elections outcomes, the challenge of new social systems like Facebook that, you know, have been built pretty much since I was here last time and are being put under a lot of discredit in more recent weeks. And then the rise of wars and conflicts and military threats in all parts of the world is actually not the easiest of time to operate in. And if I can go back, I mean, actually I understand, somewhere in my notes it said that in this year, 80% of Latin America is having its own elections. I think it's the first time in 12 years or more that Mexico and Brazil, two key economies, are electing their presidents. So let's just see what happens there, whether the unpredictability of outcomes is going to move there in the same pace, because it will change the context in which all of us have to operate. Climate change, I do not need to say much after the film. We should probably play the film again. But it's your minister, Marcelo Mena, who says that, you know, the time for climate deniers is now over. I think Chile is, in particularly this continent, the country that is most impacted by the climate change results. It's droughts, it's your floods, it's the algae killing fishery stocks. There's real impact. It's no longer a conversation about climate simulation models. If you look at the most recent Arctic research, the melting of the Arctic is now going at a pace that was not even predicted for 10, 15 years out. If you look at the big Gulf streams in the oceans, who potentially would have come to a halt, are now at their lowest level ever, causing massive disruptions in weather systems around the world. Climate change is not only a prediction, it's happening. And because it's happening, we know we're out of time, and because we're out of time, we know we will act in a massive way. The other big topic, of course, in your country is inequality. Not just your country, many countries around the world, but the good thing about Chile, I think Chile is the best country in all of Latin America. So let me have clarified that. But you get to compare yourself within the OECD, which is another standard than some of your neighboring countries compare themselves to. So you're holding yourself up to a higher standard. Within the OECD, in inequality, you score low, lowest. That's the one area where this country has to make the big push. You know, human rights are an essential element of that, and we'll talk a bit about the announcements that you made yesterday. But this is really something that must be on the minds and in the action of business leaders. Sustainability is not just about the environment, it's as much about the social aspects of society in which we all operate. I always say that, we are stressing the planet beyond what the planet can handle. And it is clear that the planetary system has now reached its boundaries in so many ways. And the language that the planet uses to scream at us is water. And sometimes it talks about floods. Last year there were these floods in Houston. Oh dear, how sad, Houston was underwater. And of course, if you're in Houston and you have a house that's underwater, it's sad. In the same week that Houston was underwater, 1,200 people lost their lives in Bangladesh because of floods. I don't know how much that made the news in Chile. It didn't make any of the news in Europe. We only talked about Houston. But actually, worse things happen. Cape Town, by many standards, the best developed city in Africa. Of all cities in all of Africa, Cape Town is a well-developed place. Got to within 10 days of having water. Not having a lack of water, having no water at all. 10 days before the deadline, it started raining, and some relief was brought, but they got very close. And of course, trust is a major component. Charles talked about it last night. In a society where there is no trust in leadership, whether it's political or whether it's business leadership, you cannot be successful. And trust continues to be under stress. Each year in Davos, the World Economic Forum, the Edelman Trust Barometer is being launched. And each year we see trust decline. Business leaders, media, academia, political leaders, there is a distrust. It leads to unexpected electorate results. It leads to violence on the streets, like I'm afraid also you have suffered here with recent student protests. We're driving also societies to a point that they no longer accept. They don't use water to scream at us, but I guess it's other ways of expressing it. So what can business actually do to lead? So I'm a great fan of the SDGs. I think it's the biggest gift that the United Nations has given to all of us in the world. It sets a clear agenda for the future we want. It gives us a framework to make trade-offs between climate and gender and education and life on Earth. But as a practical tool for a business person trying to improve its business, SDGs are a hard animal to work with. 17 goals, 169 targets, what would you like me to focus on? So in WBCSD we have said, well, we should probably talk about system transformation. That's what business can easily relate to. So let me tell you what system transformation is in our minds. Firstly, it is not true that the world will only change because of sustainability. We can look at many of the films about bad things happening, but the reality in business is there's more drivers for change. Technology being one of them. Everything is digitizing, artificial intelligence, robotization. Smartphones in your pockets are doing things that 10 years ago people would do for you. So technology and sustainability are probably the two main drivers why change is accelerating, and we're now talking about system transformation. Sustainability is not just about the environment. It's not just about the planet or water or climate. It's going to be as much a social agenda, a people agenda, which moves all the way from human rights to future of work. And I'll talk a bit about that later on. It's more and more a conversation that we have to meet, on the one hand, what science is telling us, and on the other hand, what cash flow your business is producing. So you may be in business models that produce handsome cash, but if you're not working within a science-based environment, that model is going to go. So how do you make the transition? And this sounds rather conceptual, I know. So I heard Charles say, even though he was speaking Spanish, he was mentioning 2 degrees. So you all know what 2 degrees is, right? It's climate change. So you may have heard of the IPCC, which is the International Panel for Climate Scientists. It's all the scientists in the world who over the last 25 years have written a number of editions of the best science on climate change. They have created books as thick as this that give you all the facts and details and models that are out there on climate change. If you read all the science in those books, you cannot find the statement of 2 degrees. The IPCC report does not speak anywhere about 2 degrees. It is the science-based language to talk about all the evidence that is in the books. So your business has to become science-based. You, in your company, will have to develop a strategy that shows how does your business model work when we are in a 2 degrees world. And 2 degrees world means we're going to have to halve emissions every decade. We have to be 0 carbon by 2050. What are you going to do to halve your emissions in the next 10 years? To then halve them again, to then halve them again until you're at 0. That's what should be in your business plans. And it's always an interesting challenge, meeting up with business leaders like yourself. You know, we're all competitive. Depending on the business you're in, you may think you have better solutions than your competition has. But that's, I think, the new thinking, and that's the reason why ACCIÓN, Empresas, and WBCSD exists. The realization that no company can solve these challenges alone. We must work collaboratively. And collaboration happens in 2 ways. The first one is in sectors. So all the forest companies, all the cement companies, all the utility companies of the world coming together and setting standards. The second way of collaboration is across value chains, from product to farm, from mine to end consumer products. That's how we need collaboration. So we see all kind of great initiatives in cement, in forest, in tires, working endlessly to improve the operations and set the norms and create transparent solutions for their sectors. But coming back, we see 5 big transformations of systems. Firstly, cities and mobilities will completely be redesigned. So we're going to have to move to low-emission buildings, even zero-emission buildings. We're going to move to electrification of transport. It is unstoppable. While we electrify transport, we will make them autonomous driving transport. That will lead to situations where we no longer drive ourselves, but we will Uber, or whatever product solution will come out, an autonomous car when we need it. That's the transformation that is going to happen. That will lead to up to 70% lower vehicle production numbers. So if you're in the car manufacturing business, I mean, the best example, Toyota Motor Corporation, as Japanese a company as you can probably imagine, recently announced a management change. In the press release, there was a quote of the CEO, which is very interesting because, as you know, normally Japanese leaders are rather reserved in their statements. In that press release, the Toyota press release, the CEO was quoted to say, "This change in Toyota is not about winning or losing, which is the traditional competitive model. This is about surviving or dying the transformation of the system." And all of you must think through, if a Japanese leader says that in a public document, do we have the right strategies in place to look at transformations like this? The same will happen in energy. I've said it, decarbonized world is inevitable. We're going to move out of fossil fuels into alternative fuels. It's happening, batteries, solars, the recycling movement, the circular economy movement, one of the programs of ACCIÓN Empresas as well, is going to be critical. You know, climate change was started 5-10 years ago with sad pictures of polar bears drowning on icebergs. That's what got the public engaged in climate change. Plastic in oceans are the next polar bears. turtles with plastic bags around their neck, birds with stomachs full of our junk. Statements that very soon there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean is going to mobilize public opinions. It's going to put pressure on business to move to circularity in their models. Rapid transformations. The biggest change will happen in the food and land and water space. So I talked about the IPCC publishing science-based targets for food, for climate change. In 6 months from now, the Eat Lancet Commission will come out with the science-based targets for the food system. 6 targets on the planetary boundaries that the food system has to stay within, 10 targets on healthy diets. So how do we make sure that we feed 10 billion people well within the boundaries of the planet? We'll now get scientific answers. That will change the food system. Every company who's in the food or land system will, at the end of this year, begin to have answers on, if these are the targets, what are your company doing to stay within them? The conversation is changing now at such a pace. The people conversation will move on. I talked about inequality and the scores of Chile compared to the OECD. But there's many aspects there. Human rights is going to be a massive conversation. And yesterday I met the people who actually wrote the National Action Plan here in Chile. And that's great. You know, you translate a big global UN debate into a national action plan. You get your president and the previous president to sign up to that plan, so you give it a lot of credibility. But what is even greater is to then hear Charles last night announce the new labs for human rights and business for the next 2 years to work together with all kinds of stakeholders. The Mining Association, the Energy Association, leading companies most likely in this room, to say, how are we going to really change the way that human rights are being implemented? Not just talked about or put in plans, but implemented on the ground in the supply chains and the operations that all of you have here in Chile. Amazing work. Yesterday I was asked to talk to a group of your CEOs, and my statement was that the agenda for the next 5 years will move from human rights to the future of work. So as digitization will enter our societies, jobs will be displaced. Truck drivers will no longer be needed because it's much safer, much more fuel efficient to have self-driving trucks. And this is not a technology that will take 50 years and it is up to your children and the children of your children to deal with it. These technologies are available now, will be commercial 5 years from now, and will begin to reach mass scale 10 years from now. So large parts of population will have to change jobs. There might be alternative new jobs, there may not be. This is going to be a massive conversation about what is the future of work, what is the future of jobs. And in a country that already has challenges in inequality, how is that conversation going to drive inequality even more? And what is the role of business in this conversation? I really call upon all of you to work with ACCIÓN and Empresas, to bring more stakeholders in, to look at this before the crisis emerges. Because it is great to watch at films that scare all of us. But Planet is kind of nice when she screams to us. Revolution on the street will be a little less nice to all of us in this particular room. But I think I'm optimistic. If I look at so many announcements, you know, even 3 years ago, people always asked me, which is the company that I should look up to? Which is the example of in the world? There's now every week announcements by companies, probably also here in Chile, that if you read them carefully, you think, wow, 5 years ago, that company would never have made those announcements. So I think there is a real change. Part of that is because transparency is moving rapidly. All of you are involved in reporting. All of you are being more transparent. And if you're not transparent, social media will find you out and you will be asked to respond. So redefining value is a crucial part of what success in the future will look like. And the definition of success will change. When I'm back 5 years from now, so I made the promise to Charles that I would come back 5 years from now, and then of course he tries to tell me I should come back in 3 years. I know, Karen, thank you. 3 to 5 years from now, my prediction is that the cost of capital of half the companies in this room will have been lowered because you are more sustainable. And I'll explain it, because I don't think all of you are cost of capital brains, but I'll get to that. So business is about opportunities. Business, of course, wants to do the right thing, but business also wants to understand how do we grow? Where is the opportunity for the business? So the Business and Sustainable Development Commission wrote a report called Better Business, Better World. First, a global report saying there's $12 trillion of growth opportunities, there is 380 million jobs to be created, and then a report for Latin America was published. There is $1.2 trillion of new incremental economic opportunities if business implements the SDGs in Latin America. 24 million more jobs will be created if business implements the SDGs. There are now lists of where are these opportunities broken down with business cases, spreadsheets for you to study. Look at the list and see how your business can benefit from them. We have published an SDG guide, which I think I even carried. Filippo here, he's an amazing man, Filippo. You should get to know Filippo, he's outstanding. He has helped translate it in Spanish to make it a little easier for all of you to get it. And many companies in this part of the world have subscribed to it. And what this basically said, each business must think about 4 things. First, the risk of inaction is now so big that you cannot afford not to be part of these conversations. Secondly, there are massive opportunities out there. You can grow your business by new technologies, new business models, and deliver the SDGs. Thirdly, we're in a world that is rapidly transforming in terms of transparency. You cannot hide incidents anymore. Photos and films are being made of everything and made globally aware. And the fourth one is we need to work together. And change always happens at 4 levels. It starts with you. It starts with the question on what are you going to do? Then what can the company do? What can the sector do? And eventually, what can we do together with government, with policymakers to make sure the change is embedded? This is just the journey of sustainability. So we all started talking about philanthropy, probably 18 years from now. That was still part of the conversation. Then we moved into CSR, corporate social responsibility. Today, all of you are integrating sustainability in your strategies. Tomorrow, it starts today, but tomorrow, this will be integrated into your governance. And that's where the final solution is being designed as we speak. So the definition of success for business is about to change. There is a framework called the Coso Framework that helps business assess and manage their risks. That framework 2 months ago has been extended with a guideline on how to integrate ESG, environment, social and governance aspects, into the risk assessment of a board-level conversation. This will come to Chile and all other parts of the world. The cost of capital, that's where the end goal of this journey is. So this is not a speech about saving polar bears or turtles in the ocean. Of course we want to save them and not harm any animals or people. But the only way to do that at scale, at pace that we need to win the race against time that ACCIÓN Empresas has formulated is to really change the way we think about cost of capital. So you may not be quantoids and know what cost of capital is. So cost of capital is basically the cost of your financing or the calculation of your share price. And cost of capital is a formula that is based on the risks that a business is exposed to. So if you have very high risks in your business, today mostly financial risks, you have a high cost of capital, borrowing money from a bank will be very expensive. Or if you have a high cost of capital, future cash flows will be discounted to a low value today. The lower your risks, the lower your cost of capital, the higher your share price, the lower the interest you pay the bank. And we must make sure that the risks we saw on the film that are clearly going to damage your businesses are now integrated in those calculations. Because the minute that happens, the minute you will have a financial incentive, lower interest, higher share price, to move this at the highest pace you can get it. And those things are happening. Danone has a $2 billion financing facility that is based on ESG performance. That will come to Chile as well. And I'm convinced that the Chilean business community will work this out before anyone else in this continent. This is really a conversation about competitiveness as a country, as a business, as part of the global society. So this is the slogan that ACCIÓN Empresas uses. I think it's still the right words. We must make sure that Chile is inclusive. We must, of course, have all the sustainable development goals being implemented here. And that will make it a sustainable, competitive, and successful economy. So please, keep up the great work. Keep supporting ACCIÓN Empresas. Bring your friends in. Make it bigger. Make this the movement that will build Chile to the most successful economy in this continent. I'll be back 3 years, 5 years from now. Time will tell. I'll be watching. Thank you.